Let's talk to Labour's Shadow Business Minister, Labour MP for Manchester Central in Tier 3. That's Lucy Powell, who joins us now. Good morning to you, Lucy.
Good morning, Julia.
It was announced last night from Sir Keir Starmer that the Labour Party planned to abstain on the vote on the new tier restrictions in the Commons today. What's the point of an opposition party if you don't vote against measures that you oppose?
Well, look, I know it's going to be very frustrating for people to hear that those that want us to oppose or those that want us to support. But, it's a very difficult predicament that we're in because we support the need for there to be continued restrictions of some kind. And this is a straight up and down vote today. So if it falls, there would be absolutely no restrictions at all following midnight tonight. And that's a very difficult position, and it's not one that we want to put the country in. But we do have reservations. We do have reservations about the package of measures, the way in which they're being brought in and so on. And particularly, we feel that the business support package is insufficient and unfair and will, I'm afraid, leave many businesses, especially in Tier 2 and Tier 3, going bust over the coming weeks. And that's our big issue with it, really. So we have abstained before. That's generally what we've done on these public health measures over the last few months in order that they get carried. But without needing our votes.
OK, but it's an act of moral cowardice, isn't it? To basically say, look, you bring in these restrictions that you claim are vitally important to save lives, because you don't just support these restrictions, you would support a lot more restrictions. We know Labour wanted a full earlier lockdown than we actually had. But it's an act of moral cowardice by the Labour Party to say, but we don't want to take responsibility for any of this.
Well, that's not what we're saying. And
I know it's not what you're saying, but it's what you're doing.
Well, it's not. I mean, we look, the government has an 80-seat majority in Parliament. It shouldn't be an issue whether Labour are supporting this or not. We have decided to abstain in order for these to go through. I mean, that's essentially.
Well, why do you want it to go through if you think it's going to damage businesses?
Because, as I said earlier, it's not amendable, this vote. You can't change it. With only hours to go, there is a straight up or down vote in Parliament, which if it doesn't go through, then the country would be in no restrictions at all as of midnight tonight. And, that's not our design. That's the government's design about how they design these votes, what timing they've brought them in and so on. We could have had this debate last week or 2 weeks ago, and then it wouldn't be such on a knife edge as it is. But it's very disappointing that the government still hasn't yet come forward with a proper package of support for businesses, especially those in Tier 2 and Tier 3 who aren't getting that extra support.
Look, I agree we need some more support for these businesses, but my option would be that we don't close down businesses for which there is no evidence that they are actually major transmitters of the disease. I mean, there's the reason why pubs in Tiers 2 are struggling as of tomorrow will be because they can't serve alcohol or serve a drink without a table meal. I think the actual terminology in the legislation is. There's no evidence whatsoever that eating a meal with your drink, if you're required to sit down anyway, makes any difference. Surely it's a much, much more simple process to actually not have restrictions that cause businesses to fail.
Well, it's a difficult balance, isn't it? And I agree with you.
No, it's not a difficult balance.
No, but there are lots of anomalies and difficulties in here, and I think people are now getting to the point where they're questioning the measures. Are they the right measures at the right time? Are they, can people understand what they mean? A minister yesterday, getting into hot water about whether a scotched egg was a substantial meal and so on. And these are some of our issues with this tiering system, because this is what we got into before the national lockdown when they were brought in last time. Is it did lead to a lot of confusion and mixed messages and not understanding. And as you say, it's all falling on one part of the economy and one part of society and in hospitality as well. But we do need some restrictions. We need, especially now that we've made progress through the national lockdown with infection rates coming down, now would be the wrong point to just let the virus rip and to have no restrictions at all. But the
hold-
government are giving us very little choice
If Keir Starmer went to the government and said, look, we're going to vote against this. You're not going to get this through if you've got a load of rebels who are going to vote against it. However, we will vote for it if you take out the mixed messaging, all the stupid stuff that's going to cost jobs and businesses unnecessarily, and won't actually save any lives, and you give more support to the businesses that are required when we've seen the actual evidence, and we didn't see any evidence in that dossier that was published yesterday, the 48-page impact assessment of why any particular business should be closed to cut the virus. If Keir Starmer went to the Prime Minister and said, look, otherwise these restrictions are going to fail and you're not going to have any restrictions at all, then do you really think that the government wouldn't amend those rules? They don't have to amend it because they know they'll get it through, because if you vote for it or if you abstain, they're going to get it through. Labour does have the power to stop this happening. This is an act of moral cowardice, refusing to take any responsibility for this. It shouldn't be your responsibility. The government is to blame for this, but you could stop it.
Well, we have been raising those issues for weeks and weeks, both directly, indirectly, and elsewhere. I think our views on that are very well known. I think we wouldn't be forgiven, though, either. We would be accused of playing politics, wouldn't we, if we were threatening at the very last minute to say, well, unless you do X, Y, or Z, there'll be no restrictions as of midnight. The government can still got time to do the right thing and bring forward a proper package of business support. And that's why we're abstaining on the vote this evening.
Do you understand why the First Minister of Wales, Labour's Mark Drakeford, why he's announced new measures coming in on Friday? So pubs aren't allowed to serve any alcohol. They have to close at 6 p.m. Other restrictions that come in, basic prohibition being brought in. Why would those restrictions be needed, given that Wales had what they called a fire break a lockdown? It was a circuit breaker, something that Labour supported. It was 17 days, so 2.5 weeks, over half term in October. This is what your party was constantly calling for in England. Keir Starmer did a press conference where he was very absent. There had to be an early circuit breaker, 2 to 3 weeks. It should be over half term. It should be in October. If that would have worked, surely Wales wouldn't need to have any more measures now. They would have seen their numbers go down. Do you accept now that the policy that Keir Starmer Labour Party has said is the answer, and why everything that government has done is wrong since, that actually the policy Labour supported wouldn't have worked and wouldn't have suppressed the virus?
Well, I don't accept that. I mean,
it would work in England, even though it didn't work in Wales.
Well, I think the issue had in Wales, which, I'm not fully across all the detail, but I think the issues they've had in Wales is how they've come out of that lockdown, how they've come out of that.
It's not the lockdown that failed.
The lockdown itself actually did bring I think I've lost you now.
We can hear you. No, the lockdown didn't bring down numbers, interestingly.
Yeah, I think it did work to some extent, but I think the issue has been how they've come out of that. And that's exactly what we're trying to avoid today and tomorrow in Parliament, that we've got to slowly bring ourselves out of that lockdown.
Why does coming slowly out of a lockdown mean that as lockdown works as opposed to it not working? What's the medical evidence for that?
It's how you bring yourselves out of that lockdown, and that's why we do need to have some continued.
I'm so sorry, Lucy. Neither you nor I is an epidemiologist. I understand, but you are actually someone who's got power in a way that I don't, and my listeners don't. What is the medical evidence, or any evidence whatsoever, that how you come out of a lockdown affects whether a lockdown works in suppressing a virus or not?
Well, it's whether those measures are effective for a longer period of time or not, isn't it? And whether the
circuit breaker, the 2.5-week circuit breaker, doesn't work then.
Whether the downward trend continues to be downwards, or whether it goes straight back up again. I'm being incessantly called here by I've got a
right. I know you have to go.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
All right. We'll have to leave that, Lucy Powell. It's painful, isn't it, everyone? I mean, it is painful. Can you imagine? I mean, can you imagine having to ask these questions and listen to these answers? Doesn't matter which party it is. It really doesn't. This is genuinely probably the most painful year of my professional life, having to ask these questions and listen to these answers. And it doesn't matter which party it is. I genuinely, absolutely despair at the moment. I absolutely despair.